All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to learn. We'll start from the beginning. We may go a little bit and jump a bit because this is the Farbrengen of Shabbos Parshas Vayera, which is this week's parsha. That year, it was the Shabbos that blessed the month of Shvat. So that we already did last week, and it was one of the last Farbrengens from the year 1951.
Oh, wow.
So it's one of the last Farbrengens the Rebbe Farbrenged before he officially accepted leadership in Shvat, which is the 10th of Shvat, which is probably about 11 to 12 days after this Farbrengen, with the famous Farbrengen on Yud Shvat, and he officially accepted the leadership. So this is like, we're almost there. Part of this Sicha is edited, the first part is edited and printed in Lakutei Sichas. And then there's some fascinating parts throughout the Farbrengen, and we'll try to get to some parts of those as well, depending on time. I'm not going to go as late as last week. Okay, 2 weeks ago. I got a slip of time. I just want to say that it's coming from Levitin just now, one of the soldiers that were killed, Yakir Yamin ben Yoshua. He's in Shamash Aliyah. Know the family well, and it's very sad and unfortunate. So
Where did he live? Where did he live?
here in Yerushalayim.
Oh,
So it was on
Mhm.
Higher Herzl?
Okay, so I'm going to read like last time, and I'll read the Hebrew and translate into English. So the Rebbe says like this: Hascholas parsha seinu hui behemeshech leparsha shlefnei ze parsha shmois. We know this week's parsha is a continuation from last week. Very rarely do we have parshas that really continue like this. We have a few parshas like a little bit Miketz going into Vayeshev going into Miketz, where Yosef kind of is left alone, waiting for the wine pourer to remember him. So kind of a continuation. We have other parshas as well, but this one literally is last week's parsha ends mid-conversation. Moshe goes to Hashem at the end of the parsha and says, "Lama hara'isa lama zeh." Why have you made it bad for the word ra? Why did you make it bad for these people? So the Rebbe says, Shisiyuma, the end of last week's parsha is Kushiyas Moshe Rabbeinu Kadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe's question to God. Lama hara'isa lam hazeh. Why did you make it bad? Because what happened? God sent Moshe to speak to Paro. Paro got annoyed and said that the Jewish people are looking for, they're lazy, and therefore he's going to make the work more difficult. And it was extremely difficult for the Jewish people. They were upset at Moshe, and Moshe was upset that he caused this. So he asked Hashem, Lama re'esa lama zeh? Why did you send me to make it bad for the Jewish people? Lama zeh shlachtani? Why did you ever send me? A continuation to that question, which God begins to answer at the end of last week's parsha. But Shuvasi Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this week's parsha, the Moshe, Ba'ascholas parsha seinu. In the beginning of this week's parsha, God answers Moshe. It says, Vaydaber Elikim, El Moshe, God speaks to Moshe, and he uses the name Elokim. Vayomer Love, and he tells Moshe, Ani Havaya. So we know that the names of God all represent something. The name of Elokim is the way God conceals himself within creation. And the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is the creator, is the name of Hashem that's beyond creation, who creates. So Elokim tells Moshe, Ani Havaya, that what you think is natural, you think is regular, is really coming from Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, from the level of Hashem that's obviously beyond creation. The Eira of Avram, and he continues, God continues talking to Moshe. He says, I revealed myself to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Bekel Shaddai, with the name of Shin Daled Yud, B'Shmi Havaya Lo Yadaitu Lehem, and they never properly understood the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And nevertheless, they never questioned me, and you questioned me. And therefore, God continues to Moshe, and he says, L'chein Emer L'vnei Yisrael, give over a message to the Jewish people, Ani Havaya, that I am the Lord, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the name of God that is beyond creation, the one that is limitless, and that's the level of God of miracles. And therefore, Vaytzeisi Eschem, I will take you out, Mitachas Sivleis Mitzrayim, from the difficulties of Egypt, and with continuing different language of redemption, and then the pasuk finishes off, "V'lekachti eschem li la'am," I'll take you to a people as a people, and you will know that I'm God. Okay, so that's the answer. God tells Moshe, and Moshe says, why have you sent me? I've only made it worse. So now the Rebbe continues. In Var b'Torah Or, the Alter Rebbe in Torah Or explains like this, that Shemat in Torah, when it came time of giving the Torah, then we had revelations of God that was beyond creation, which is the name of Havaya. Like it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, right? That's the beginning, opening of the Ten Commandments. And the Alter Rebbe continues to explain, like I said before, this was not revealed to the fathers. If you want to get such a revelation, any gain comes with effort. So if you want to get this higher level of revelation, Hashem, and you'll know about the level of God of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So there has to be a preparation, and not always is the preparation pleasant. And in this case, it's Golus Mitzrayim, it's the exile of Egypt. And that is Harais Lamazah. That's why things seem to be bad. Because before something great is about to happen, sometimes there's a withdrawal. In Chassidus, it explains it in many ways. It explains it as labor pains and birth pains and a deep sleep, different levels of, or deep concentration of withdrawals. But the bottom line is levels of withdrawal, levels of limitations, and sometimes even difficulties. U'misayim sham, and the Alter Rebbe continues and finishes off, Shazel Gama time, that this also will explain, if one wonders, why this exile is so long, right? We're in exile close to 2,000 years. Why? Then the Jews were getting ready for the great revelation of Har Sinai. Now we have something great coming. Mashiach is about to come. And the revelations of Mashiach are so great that in order to get to such a level of revelations, we have to go through what we are going through in both length and difficulty. And that's why also Alter Rebbe mentions, it says that you could have periods of time that are not so difficult, even though we're in exile. It's like a woman who's pregnant. You get pregnant, get pain, and then it could relax a bit. But right before the birth happens, that's when the major pain kicks in. And therefore, it could get very difficult, unfortunately, right before something great that's about. So the Rebbe continues. Anything that we find in Torah is obviously true and everlasting. And therefore, the Rebbe is going to say a point here. This is understood. Even when you have a question in the Torah, right? You have sometimes a question. And there's an answer to the question. But if the question itself is mentioned in Torah, the Rebbe says, even if there's an answer to that question, there's still a place for a question. It means even though God answers Moshe, that there's a reason why things became bad or more difficult. Right? Moshe is minding his own business as a shepherd in Midian. He meets God on the mountain, the burning bush. God says, go redeem the Jewish people. He doesn't want the job. He spends 7 days arguing with Hashem, comes to Egypt as pretty much a newcomer. He wasn't part of the whole slavery. He was, some people say 40 years he was at least gone from Egypt. He comes, he's 80 years old, and he comes in and he says, I'm here to redeem the Jewish people. The Jewish people initially believe, they're ready, and then all of a sudden things get worse. So, the question's a question. So the Rebbe says that in Torah, if the question is mentioned in Torah, it's a question. Even if there's an answer, there's still an idea of the question that's still there. And the Rebbe gives an example. My father-in-law said once at a gathering of Chag HaShavuos about the question that in Torah's Chassidus, why do we celebrate the completion of Torah or the joy of Torah at the end of Sukkot, right? And not on the holiday of Shavuos when we were given the Torah, which is Ma'amat and Torah Seinu. And there's a reason given why, that the Torah was given in one kind of idea, which is the intellect of Torah, the dancing of the Torah is the Torah, the way it's closed, the self-nullification to Torah. But the Rebbe said, but because the very fact that that's still a question that's mentioned in Torah, even though we have an answer to the question, there's still the question. So the Rebbe is teaching us something. When the Torah asks a question which is we know in Talmudic language that the Havamina, the initial thought, has, even though when you answer that it's no longer a valid thought or not a correct thought, but it's still a thought. So the Rebbe said like this: "Kamokim b'nidan." So too in our case, Kivan Shakusha, since Moshe asked the question, and the question is mentioned in Torah, Lama Haraisa, why did you make it bad for the Jewish people? And it's mentioned in Torah, then it's a question. We see what the Rebbe is getting at here. He's trying to say something. And therefore the Rebbe says, top page 117, Harigam la'achrei tiritz, even after God answers his answers, that in order to get to the great revelation of Har Sinai, of Mount Sinai, one needs to go through challenges. Yeshadai makom latayna, but there's still a question: why did you make it bad?
177.
Yes, now we're starting Gimel. So the Rebbe is going to go in, basically, I'm going to say outside a bit. The Rebbe is going to go in and say the answer the Rebbe is giving is that not everything difficult has to be physically difficult. That there's a way, sometimes a person, the Rebbe introduces I believe, revolutionary idea, that sometimes a person has a decree or whatever, like in our case, in order to get to revelation of Har Sinai, you have to go through difficulties. But you don't always have to go through difficulties in the way that we think. Sometimes it's enough to go through difficulties of a positive difficulty. Right? Imagine you're tossing and turning at night because you can't figure out the answer of the Gemara. Imagine you're really bothered because you didn't have an opportunity to do a favor for another Jew. It means you could decide what stresses you out. You could be stressed out by bad things, or you could be stressed out by good things. And that's why there's the question. The question is, why did it have to be that it was hard physically for the Jewish people? Why couldn't they switch it in for, staying up at night wondering what's the answer of the Gemara, what the Tosfos mean, or what Rashi want to say, or what's the best way I could say Shema Yisrael and really love Hashem, right? You could make that something that stresses you out, that preoccupies you. So here's what the Rebbe is going to introduce it. He says, after that that one of the answers to why this is really a question. So the Rebbe explains that we had to have the slavery of exile. That is how we prepare ourselves for the revelation. Revelation comes after challenges. We call Malcolm, however, we could have switched it. It could have been that we were spiritually enslaved. We were stressed out spiritually. As the Alter Rebbe himself explains in Torah Or, that that all the difficulties that are mentioned about the Jewish people suffering in Egypt, a person could also have in Torah. For instance, he goes, the description the Torah gives of what was difficult, their life was bitter, the word maror, that's why we have maror on the Pesach table. With hard labor, with hard mortar and bricks, and all the difficult work in the field, which literally translates as hard work. But the Alter Rebbe says one could do that beruchni, spiritually. For instance, what does it mean to be bitter in life? Torah. We know Torah is our life, so that the bitterness of life is through toiling in Torah. That's difficult. You're not looking for an easy way in Torah. You're ready to do Yagiyah Torah, to toil in Torah. Avoda kasha, what does it mean to have hard work? Is a kushya. You have questions. What am I supposed to do? I don't understand everything. And you're bothered by the questions. You're not just saying, okay, whatever. I don't understand. It's not so important to me anyway. So if I don't understand, I don't understand. If Torah really mattered to you, you'd be bothered by a question. What does it mean, chomer, which is the raw materials? That could be that you're preoccupied in trying to figure out a kal v'chomer. What's a kal v'chomer? Which is one of the rules of Torah. That if something is light, which is kal, and something is difficult, so if the light thing has a certain rule, even more so, the chomer, or vice versa. What does it mean? Work in the field is the brisa, understanding the extensions of the Mishnah, known as the brisa. What does it mean? Bricks. Bricks also what comes from the word libun, to burn and to make white. What is to make white? To make clear the law. Sometimes you get difficult. What is the law in a certain situation? and etc. Barichas, as the Alter Rebbe says at length. So basically, a person could be yotze the difficulties of Golus in a spiritual way. That you push it stressed out in trying to make sure the halacha is right, making sure when someone asks you a question, it's not like, whatever, I don't know the answer, you check up on Google fast, but you really try to learn it, to understand it, so that's, you're toiling in other things, and you don't have to preoccupy yourself in physical labor. And the Rebbe says, Kishem she'inin ha'golus kipshutai, yoichel lahachliv es inyonim b'ruchnis. So the Rebbe says, just like in general, a person could transfer the difficulties of exile to be spiritual difficulties. So the Rebbe says, so too, one of the most difficult challenges of our golus, of our exile, as the Alter Rebbe describes it many times in his teachings, is the yegia of it, tir de parnasa, the toil and efforts and time a person has to put in to make a living, right? How much, even if you're successful, hopefully, Baruch Hashem, in providing for your family or for yourself, but it's difficult. You put a lot of time and effort, keeping your job, upgrading your job, getting a raise. You think about it a lot. And even if you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to make sure you stand top and how can I make another dollar and be more successful. So it's called Yigia V'tir to Parnasa, the difficulties of Parnasa, making a living. And like the Rebbe says here in the parentheses, that is the main part of exile, is the preoccupation and the difficulties it is sometimes to make a living. So the Rebbe says you don't have to go through that. If you're ready to transfer that, you could exchange it. You give it to the Torah and you're toiling in Torah. Means just imagine the same effort you have in trying to earn a living is the same effort you have to trying to carve out time and study Torah. The Rebbe is like this. Iker tirdas parnaso. How do you define difficulties of making a living? What is the difficulties? What is this preoccupation? The Rebbe says is the idea of rabas machshavas bleivish. You have so many thoughts. Your mind is constantly running about your job or your work. When you get into a situation where you don't know what's the best move to make. What do I have to do now? What move I should make, whether it is choosing a job or in a business deal or what have you. But there's a lot of times what's known as the suffix, the doubt. The Rebbe says that could be switched to Torah. To Torah and Torah. And you could have the same suffix, the same doubt. When you're studying Torah, you say, well, I could go one way in my conclusion of what I'm studying, which means a svara lakan, I can have the idea going one direction, or svara lakan, or the conclusion could be another direction. And you're toiling and stressed out because you don't know what is the right path. She said, that's very difficult. Rabbi says an amazing thing in footnote number 15. I'll say it outside. He says, this is the difference between bina and das. Now we know that in the intellect is broken down into three parts. Chachma is the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, right? So the chachma we know is the spark of the idea, and then bina is the part of our brain that breaks it down, analyzes it, and works it out, right? So the thing about, like in the name of Hashem, the chachma, the spark is the letter yud, and hey, which is a square, that's breaking it down. Now, when you break something down, it has many components, and that's where there's doubt, right? If you have an idea, so you could have a general idea, but how to go about it and how to act on it and how to make it happen, sometimes you could have a lot of, you don't know, because you're the part of your brain that works bina just is analyzing information, but the feeling of what the right thing to do, that's das. When you say, I know this is the right way. Why? I can't tell you why I know. I just know I'm connected. This seems to me, my intuition, my gut tells me this is the right thing. That's das, because das is the hergish, the feeling. So the Rebbe says when a person has all the suffix, but you don't have the das yet. You're not connected enough to actually come to a proper conclusion. The Rebbe says, he continues, and we're going to turn the page to 178 in a second. The Rebbe says the Ragachover is a great Gaon, a great Talmudist. Omer Pami once said, what's his most difficult day of the week is Shabbos. His hardest day of the week is Shabbos. Why? Why would Shabbos be the hardest day of the week? So he says, if I'm in the middle of the week, Sunday, Monday, what have you, when his mind starts to run and ideas start flowing, right? Page 178. So he says, and he has ideas going one direction or another direction. He has a solution. What is the solution when his mind starts to run? Ksiva. He can start writing everything down. When your mind starts getting a little muvulvav, a little confused, and a little running, so the best thing is you start to write it down so you can organize it. He said because when you start to write things down, it limits it. It puts things in perspective. And then you can decide what's the right idea. What do you do on Shabbos? Your mind is running. And Kivan aids to do, and he doesn't have this solution. You can't start writing it down. Shabbos is not allowed to write. So he's forced to keep on thinking. And he can't limit his thought, and therefore it's very difficult for him to conclude, and therefore Shabbos for him he finds challenging. Here we're talking about a person, like a Rogachover Gun, he was very close to the Rebbe. He said he didn't like to take a haircut. He had huge hair. He didn't like to take a haircut because there's a little bit of, in Chassidus it teaches us there's a little bit of the brain in the hair. So he didn't want to limit, he wanted full access. So if he felt if he took the haircut, it would kind of maybe trim things down a bit. So he says, like this, the Rebbe says an example. We know the story that when the Admir Emsai, when the Mittel Rebbe, means the son of the Alter Rebbe, the second Rebbe Chabad, would say Chasidus, you have to remember, the Mittel Rebbe said Chasidus for sometimes 8-9 hours at a time. In a single setting, he just sat for 8 hours and spoke. Hayisheket Muchlet, it was absolutely quiet whenever he spoke. The Rebbe says in footnote number 18 that there was once a Gentile attendant who walked by and he stopped and he sees here's someone talking and no one's making any sounds, not even regular sounds that people make. As just when you have any 100 or a few hundred people in the room, there's always sounds. No sounds, absolutely quiet. So nevertheless, off became, even though it was absolutely quiet while he said Chassidus, while he would say Chassidus, sometimes he would himself say, V'shas Amir's Chassidus, Sha, be quiet, be quiet. So there's no one's making any noise. Why was he saying be quiet? And the Rebbe Rashav, his grandson, great-grandson, explained, he wasn't saying quiet to the people. He was saying quiet to his brain. His brain was running. He was running too much. He wanted his brain to quiet down. To calm the brain down, so to let him try to put things in perspective. So the Rebbe says, why did he have to quiet it down? So the Rebbe explains, because like we said before, when things are running, it's very hard to machria, to come to conclusion. And every time, and every time you come to some sort of conclusion, your mind is running. So it says, 1 second, maybe it's the other way, and you have a deeper idea. So therefore, in order to quiet his mind, he said, Shah. And therefore the Rebbe says, this is an example of a person could have golus, difficulties, toiling, that's not related to material. Means some people tell you that they don't want that, right? Some people want to have, they don't want to be in an emotional situation where their brain is running and things are confused. They'd rather, maybe I'd rather labor a little bit and have a calmness. But if a person doesn't want to go through that, if that's too difficult, like the Jewish people said, it's too difficult for us. So it could have been that they would be able to preoccupy themselves and be toiled in Torah. Okay. Here the Rebbe is going to go into something that's an amazing idea, because that's what the Rebbe is really leading up to. And this next idea the Rebbe is going to introduce is that we find in Mitzrayim, it wasn't so much what they did, or it wasn't so much about the hardness of, let's say, carrying a 200-pound stone or what have you. It was to do things that you're not used to. It's much more difficult to have to deal with things that you're not used to than things. Sometimes a person, if they're used to something or good at something or familiar with something, they'd rather do that, even if it could be more labor intensive, than to do something they're not familiar with. Because it's not something they're familiar with, and it makes them uncomfortable, and it makes them, so we know the Egyptians did that for the Jewish people. They would make the men do women's work, and the women do men's work. It wasn't so much that it was more difficult to wash the dishes, no one's making that light, but it was just something they weren't used to. And doing the laundry and whatever the things that maybe those days the men didn't do and the women did do, it was more difficult. And that was and so the Rebbe says sometimes to make to be yoitza, difficulties in life, it's not about doing something very hard. A person doesn't have to choose something very hard in their life. Sometimes what you need to is just get out of your comfort zone. Right? If you want to do a mitzvah, do a little more. Give tzedakah, give a little more. Learn a little more. If you do a favor, go out of your comfort zone. I was telling the people, we were learning in class last week, I was telling people, sometimes tzedakah is easier than having guests. Right? No one's coming, no one's coming to my house. I'll give you money, you need money to buy food, that's fine. But to bring you into my house, that could sometimes be more difficult for someone. So that's getting out of your comfort zone. So the Rebbe says it doesn't have to be something big. Just get a little bit uncomfortable with Torah mitzvahs. But now let's see it inside. The Rebbe says, beginning after the Shibboleth tribe, one of the main components of the slavery of Egypt was avodas perach, the very difficult work. What's a difficult work? So Pirush avodas perachu, the Gemara says, that they switched the jobs of females to males and males to females. It was very difficult because it was things they weren't used to. Sometimes a person, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but sometimes a person would want to stay in the office another 3 hours of hard work because they're not interested in going home and putting the kids to bed. Maybe putting the kids to bed is easier, but it's hard because they're not used to it. So there was it was difficult because they weren't used to it. The Rebbe says this idea of avodas perach, the difficult, which means things that you're not used to or out of your comfort zone. When you do something in Torah mitzvahs, it's not so much that if you're totally obsessed and exhausted with toiling, it's just get out of your comfort zone. Do something that you're not used to. Sometimes for some people, to stand on the street in Ben Yehuda or the Shuk and give candles out to women or ask men to put on film. For some people, that's something they enjoy doing. But some people, they're very uncomfortable doing that. Yes. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. You have to stand there and they get ignored. And, people don't always appreciate it. And it's hard. It's not even hard work. If you think about it, you're just standing there asking people to put on film. But psychologically and mentally, it can be very difficult on a person. So it depends. That means you're doing something that's out of your comfort zone. So the Rebbe says, just like when it comes to what does it mean, hard labor, is meleches nashim. Is meleches nashim called in meleches nashim? Sometimes the female work can be hard. It could be easier work technically than the male work. Because we know the Gemara says that a man is supposed to be a conqueror, not necessarily as a woman's job to be a conqueror. And technically, conquering could be more difficult. Nevertheless, Kivan, if you're not used to it, then it's considered very hard work. So too beruchni, so too spiritually. Sometimes what a person needs to do to so to say be yaitza, to fulfill the need to do something difficult for Yiddishkeit and therefore not have to do something difficult material or physically, is not always a big thing. The Rebbe says it could be a kleinigkeit, it could be something small. Avakivan should be shvi lo, but for that person, you have to change what you're comfortable with. Like I said, to stand outside and to ask someone to put on film, outside to ask someone if she wants to have candles for Shabbos, that's sometimes that's required. That 5 minutes of that is what Hashem wants you to do. Just get a little bit uncomfortable for God. And with that, you won't have to go through difficulties in material. Okay, we'll go a little further in this yichud, and then we're going to jump to some ideas on getting ready for Yud Shvat. Okay. And the Rebbe gives an example, page 179. It can before Betanya, Tanya brings down in chapter 15, right? So Tanya in chapter 15 discusses what's the difference between a person who serves God and a person who doesn't serve God. So both people are people that are not are even the Beinoni. They haven't done anything wrong. But they haven't, the person who serves God is a person who gets uncomfortable for God, pushes themselves a little more. And the Rebbe gives an example. That one of the examples is, based on the Talmud that says, in those days, they used to study because they didn't have books. The oral Torah was all by mouth. So everything they heard, they studied 100 times. So if you're used to studying everything 100 times, that's okay. But if you have to do it 101 times, it gets you all worked up. That's what the Gemara says. It's much harder to do one more time. But that one more time has all the value in it. Why? Because you got uncomfortable for God. The Gemara says, "Shashayne perak mea pamim levad." If you only study it 100 times, you're called a person of lo yavada. You don't serve God. However, Shashayne perak mea pamim ve'achad. But if you go 101 times for God, then you're a person who serves God.
What does that mean if you feel uncomfortable studying all the time? It's better.
No, it's not that you're uncomfortable all the time. It's just, when you get into a routine, a lot of people get into routine. So if you get into routine, sometimes you just need to break the routine. Because part of what happens is you get into a comfort zone in the routine and you become fixed with the routine. And that becomes very easy to do. You have it down to a clock. You wake up 4:07. You wake up 5:15. Right? Everything's exact. You have your day mapped out. It takes you this long to go to the mikvah, and then you go to shul, and you say your Tanya, and you have time for a little tzedakah and a little preparation. You even have clocked in 5 minutes for a coffee, and you're ready to daven. Take that person and take them out of their comfort zone and throw their time a little out of balance. And they get all worked up. It gets very difficult. Why? Because you're accustomed to it. So you don't have to do something very difficult. Just get out of that routine. But therefore, the Tanya says that according to the Talmud, that someone who studies 101 times is called a person who serves God. Shaf said if you're doing 100 and 101, it's not even 1%, right? It's less than 1%. Shaf says it's only one extra time. You're changing what your routine is. Because those days they only studied 100 times. Then you become a person who serves God. And therefore the Rebbe says in the parentheses, he quotes from the Tanya, by days and that one extra time, that getting out of your comfort zone, that touches the essence of the soul. Because the very fact that you're ready to get uncomfortable for Hashem, that shakes things up. It means when your conscious levels of the soul, which are the nefesh, ruach, neshama, and here he says not even the echida. He says it touches the echida of the soul. Not even the chai, beyond the chai, it touches the essence of the soul. This eser koichas aklul be'eser, that's 100 times 100. And when you get out of that, you reach the kesser, you reach the krem. Right, so let's try to see if the Rebbe finishes this idea here. Let's go further. The Rebbe is like this. Another idea about this getting uncomfortable out of your routine. The Rebbe says, if you do something light, but just the fact that it's out of your routine, out of what you're accustomed to, that if the person does that, gets out of the comfort zone for God, then you call the person that serves God, and then you could kind of get out of doing difficult things in a physical way. Aliserim is more than that. Even if when you get out of your routine, it's not because you really feel it. Like I really want to connect with that 101 time. You just do it by force. Well, like sometimes you do something. While you're doing it, you don't want to do it. It's like you're standing there and you're connecting with that uncomfortable moment. You're not connecting with the uncomfortable moment. It's uncomfortable, and you're not happy to do it. but you know this is what Hashem maybe wants you to do, and you're getting a little bit uncomfortable for God, so you're doing it, but you're not feeling it. So it's called chitzonis. It's external. It hasn't penetrated pnimi. It hasn't penetrated internally to you. The Rebbe says, even more than that. You haven't internalized it. Internally, you're still connected to what you're comfortable with, and you're not happy to be doing something you're not comfortable with. You see people, right? You have your children to do something that they're not comfortable with, they'll complain and complain. I don't want to do it. Why? You have to do it. You're forcing yourself. So you may think, what's the point in forcing myself? I'm not happy doing it. I'm possibly not even successful what I'm trying to do. Right? Someone posted a story a few months ago or so on COL, a person who himself became a Baal Tshuva. He said, I want to tell all those Chabadniks who stand here or there, wherever you are, in America or Israel or Eretz Yisrael or some other place, and you stand, let's say, a whole day by a bookstore or a supermarket asking people to put on tefillin, and you walk out after 2 hours or an hour, however long you're standing there. Possibly in America you have it more than in Eretz Yisrael because so many Jews here, that you'll walk away and you'll feel like you were totally unsuccessful. You haven't reached one person. Now, one person told you yes. You stood there for an hour or two, and that one person said that he wants to put on film. That one lady said she's ready to take Shabbos candles. And you may think, I just literally wasted an hour or two. Like, what did I accomplish? Literally, I have not inspired one person to do something. So this person writes an article. He says, I was once one of those people. I was walking into a supermarket. A Chabad man was standing there, or a young man, or what have you, was standing there, and asked me if I wanted to put on film. I said, no, and I continued walking. But when I came home, I thought about it, and I said, why don't I put on film? So I put on film. And one thing led to the next, and today I'm a religious person married with children. So he says, don't discount the no's so fast. Sometimes the no's is also a yes. So you have sometimes a person feels like it's hard, it's difficult. The Tamadavar, and why is a person still considered a person who serves God, even if it's only external, not internally? So here the Rebbe uses the idea, because really deeper than what your conscious is feeling, your soul really does want to do what it's supposed to do. It's just that you're inside, what you're feeling is kind of your Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara is not comfortable. But your Yetzer Tov, your essence of the soul does want to do it, and therefore you're doing it, and your essence of your soul wants to do it, but your conscious soul doesn't want to do it. So therefore you're considered a person who serves God. And the Rebbe says, Apizah, based on this, we'll also understand, but the Tanya, when he brings an example of a person who toils, that extra effort, the Alter Rebbe brings on an example of those days they would have, like today we rent, U-Hauls or pickup trucks. So those days they didn't have pickup trucks. So what did you do if you wanted to move your house? You rented from the donkey. You rented a donkey from the donkey renter, and you would go to the donkey. He would say, "Okay, this is how much it costs to rent it for so and so many hours, and you could carry so many pounds per load." And over 3 hours it'll cost you $100, and then I want it back for after 3 hours. So the Gemara says, so in theory, if you rent it for 3 hours, it should be $100. If you rent it for 6 hours, it should be $200. But it's not like that. If you rent it for 3 hours, it's $100. If you rent it a little bit more than that, you have to pay double. So why do you have to pay double? I only went a little bit over, because also the donkey's only used to doing a certain amount of work. As soon as you go overtime, right? As soon as someone has to work another 5 minutes.
There's also a special rate maybe you get for a certain amount of time.
Sorry?
Sometimes they give you a special rate for a certain amount of time, and then if you go over, then you have to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that's if the machine or the person just wants to get you out of what they're used to. But in the donkey's case, it's hard for the donkey. The donkey's only used to carrying so much for so long. So if the donkey has to work, it's a lot more effort, and therefore the owner of the donkey expects more money because he's working his donkey more than the donkey's used to. So the Alter Rebbe says, "Apizah Yehuvim," they will stand. But the Alter Rebbe says, it brings in Tanya an example, Mishuk Shal Chamorim, that the shuk of donkeys, Shiniskarim le'eser parsi bezuzeh. that if you wanted to go a distance of 10 parsi, that's a distance, then you had to pay the amount of a zuz. But if you wanted to go 11 parse, which is only, again, less than 10%, betrays it, then you have to pay double. But you're only going, 9.5% more. Because it's more than the donkey's used to. A donkey's used to traveling 10 parse, and you want to go 11 parse, it's already toiling the donkey. And therefore you have to pay double. So here the Rebbe asks, the movement seemingly doesn't make sense. Why did the Gemara, why did the Alter Rebbe have to bring a second example of a person or someone or something that you pay more for a little extra toil? We had one example already. The example was someone who's used to studying 100 times, and in order to study 101 times, it's very difficult. Why does he have to bring a second example of a donkey that's used to going the distance of 10 parsec, and now it wants to go, you want it to go 11 parsec? And the very fact that Alter Rebbe brings two examples. Because in order to properly understand what the Alter Rebbe is talking about changing what you're comfortable with, changing your routine, there needs to be this extra example. Will understand why does there have to be an extra example? When you give an example, all the components of the example, all the nuances of the example should match with what you're trying to explain. Because the example comes from the case that you're trying to explain. It has to make sense in all levels. And therefore, what is it talking about a donkey? In this case, when we talk about the donkey, we mean the body of a person. And we know that the Baal Shem Tov says that you can't overwork your body. Azav tazavima, you have to work with your body, you have to help your body. You can't ignore the body and just work on the soul. A person may say, you know what, my body wants to do all kind of things, and my soul is holy, so I want to be holy. So I'm gonna pain the body, so it doesn't try to drag me to do things that I don't want to do, and I'm just gonna live a life of the soul. The Baal Shem Tov taught us, the famous teaching of Baal Shem Tov, one should not do that. If you're struggling with certain things that the body wants, you have to find a language and a way to communicate to the body that the body should no longer want to do those things. But the body should put the same energy it wants to put in to maybe negative things, to put those into positive things, holy things. And Vishnei Afanim is that there's two ways that we could work on our body. One is Shiachta li is chamor. We try to explain the body, stop being a donkey. Why do you want to do these kind of things? You shouldn't have a desire to do these kind of things. Like he says in Yiddish, Machen dem guf ois chamor. Make the body no longer a donkey. Las is medaber. Become a human. Don't be an animal. Which means, in Chasidut's translation, that means his hapcha, transformation. Transform yourself. No longer be a person. Have the conversation. I think I said it in the class before. It says that the Chassid Reb Gershon Ber Pahar once asked, I think the Rebbe Rechavia, the Rebbe Marash, he was a great Chassid. We're talking about a great Chassid who had great understanding. He would sit hours. His one sin that he never forgave himself for was that he missed Ma'ariv as a young boy. Why did he miss Ma'ariv as a young boy? He wasn't sleeping or playing games. He missed Ma'ariv or a young man. He missed Ma'ariv because he sat down in the afternoon on a nice summer day in his backyard and he started to think about Chassidus. And he got so preoccupied in his thinking about Chassidus, by the time he came out of his trance, it was already daybreak. And he spent the entire evening, entire night thinking Chassidus. And by the time he realized, it was already time to say Shachris. He quickly davened Ma'ariv, but it was questionable if he was allowed to. And his whole life he asked a tikkun for that, to fix that. So Reb Gershon Ber once asked the Rebbe Marash, is it possible for him to daven, and when he davens the words of davening, that he should translate the words into Yiddish? Like he says, if you're saying the davening, he should then translate into Yiddish. Why? Seemingly you shouldn't do that. You should just read the prayer. Why? He says, because my nefesh habahamis, my animal in me understands Yiddish better than Hebrew. So if I really want to change myself, I have to talk a language that my body understands. The Rebbe says an example. He gives an example. You do a sipur. There's a known story. So the Alter Rebbe was a young man, and he goes to the court of Mezrich, and he becomes a student of the Maggid. The Maggid has a famous son called the Malach, Avram the angel, who the Maggid instructed his son, the Malach, to teach the Alter Rebbe Chassidus. And the Alter Rebbe should learn with him Talmud. So, Yidua Sipur, so in the story, Shebshah Rabbeinu Zaken Omed Linsoya Mezrich, and the Alter Rebbe was going to leave Mezrich after he spent a long time, I believe over a year, studying in the Maggid's court with the Maggid and the Maggid's son Avram the Malach, is Halach Harava Kodesh, the holy Harava Malach, the son, the Rebbe the Malach, which was Benoy Shal Maggid Mizrish, the son of the Maggid. Levitin, he accompanied him to get ready to travel, right? He's supposed to accompany someone. So the Alter Rebbe climbed onto the wagon, right? The transportation of the day. He climbed up on the wagon, and the wagon had a wagon driver. So the Malach turned to the wagon driver and told him, Yesh lahatzlit besusim, you should hit the horses. Medaf schmeißen die Pferd, you have to hit the horses, shiaftu li asusim. The Pferds are very nice Pferd, that they should stop being horses. Means you should hit the horses to the extent they should stop being a horse. That's a horse, an animal. Stop being an animal. Another language that some people say he said, Shasusim Yodishem Susim, at least the horses should know they're horses, though they shouldn't think they're people. But the idea is to bring a realization. Sometimes we think we're people and we act like animals, and we think we're animals and we're acting like people. Know what you are. You're a person, not an animal. If you're an animal, then you're not a person. At least have awareness. Awareness is very important to Avodas Hashem. When you think you're one thing and you're something else, then how are you supposed to serve Hashem? The fair zone Visanas is unfair. At least the horses should know the horses. So here he says, the Rebbe says, when the Alter Rebbe heard the Maggid say that, he said, he learned a whole new service of God. Just from the Maggid. The Maggid was not really talking to the wagon driver. He was talking to the Alter Rebbe. He was teaching him a way of serving God. That you either have to hit the horses to stop being horses, change the horse, or at least know you're a horse. When you know you're a horse, you could have a conversation. The Rebbe said like this, and because of that, the Alter Rebbe says he got off the wagon, and he stayed in Mezrich. Means he left his wife, his young wife, and he went to Mezrich to learn by the Maggid. He gets on the wagon, and the Maggid's son, the Malach, says, you have to either realize you're a horse, at least have awareness, or try to stop being a horse, be a person. And the Alter Rebbe heard that. He said, 1 second, what am I doing on the wagon? I still have a lot to learn. He got off the wagon and went back to study. Like Rabbi Kiva, story of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva went to go study 12 years. He went to study in yeshiva, and he almost came home. He's about to walk into his door, and he hears his wife saying to a friend, a neighbor, the neighbor was taunting the wife and said, where's your husband? Why has he been gone for so many years? So she says, because he was learning Torah. So she says, if he would listen to me, he would go back and learn another 12 years. It says Rabbi Kiva didn't even walk in to say hello. He turned around and went right back to study for another 12 years. So that's a level. That's a story of Rabbi Kiva. So the Rebbe says, or another way to deal with your body is sometimes you can't transform the body, but you can at least work on the body to restrain the body. Skafia means restrain it. And even if you restrain it, restraining doesn't mean to torture it. Restraining means you don't have to give in to every urge that you have, right? Not every time you want to eat something, you have to eat something. Not every time you want to indulge in something, even if it's permissible, you have to indulge in it. You have a little self-control, have a little holiness. It says in the Talmud that the Talmid Chachamim would eat a little bit later. Why would you eat a little bit later? It adds kedusha because you restrain yourself. Now, the people attack the food right away. Don't attack the food. And So I'm going to skip down to Ches. The Rebbe said like this. In our time, the time of the footsteps to Mashiach, Mudgesh b'yoyser she'inyan d'avodah perach beruchnius, nas de'shin ha'regilus afilu b'avodah kal davar koten. The Rebbe says when it comes to the days of Mashiach, the days that are coming, the footsteps of Mashiach, the heels of Mashiach, no one's asking anyone to do something great. A person may think, I have to do something great. The Rebbe says, you don't have to do something great. A person could do something small. The Rebbe is already starting to get us ready for his Farbrengen of Yud Shvat. The Rebbe says they're not asking from us. No one's asking from us great things. The great things, the great sparks that needed to be refined. The earlier generations did the hard work. They were much harder than us. All them, the difficult things, the huge things that had to be done, that's been done already. Like Rashi says in the beginning of the parsha, when Hashem is comparing Moshe to Avram, he says, I spoke to the fathers who are the early fathers, the Rashi. Why does he say Rishonim, the first fathers? Not because they were earlier than Moshe Rabbeinu, they were also greater than Moshe. They were the earlier ones. They were the OGs, the originals. Because they were greater, they could have done great things to refine the great sparks. In our generation, the Rebbe says, the generation of Mashiach, really the heel of Mashiach, the heel of the heel, the Rebbe says. Nishu Rakim Yanim Ketanim is only small things. Nitzutzim Ketanim, the small sparks for us to pick up. Shetzrichim Levarer, Hainu Shedarshim Itanim Yanim Ke'ela, the kind of things that Hashem, so to say, wants from us in our generations. Shemitzad Atzim Hem Yanim Kalim, they may be small things and easy things. But they were given in hard times, right? Go tell them, look at the yeshiva students of today, which are great, but sometimes they struggle with things that maybe other yeshiva boys in the early years didn't. But the other boys didn't live in hard times. But the challenges that a yeshiva boy has today, smartphones and all, how could you expect that with all the distractions that a person has today? It's so much difficult to be a focused yeshiva boy. You know, when you live in the shtetl, there's not much going on. So we're living in hard times. Because there's great concealment and there's darkness, a double darkness of the times of Mashiach, of the days coming leading up to Mashiach. If God would have wanted for us to do great things in the difficult times, the Rebbe says, I don't know if we would be able to. Therefore, what we have to do are light things, easy things. But we're living in hard times. And sometimes in hard times, it's hard to do easy things. Like the Rebbe says, we have the small vessels to pick up. We know that Yaakov himself, if he only had small pots 3,000 plus years ago, surely we only have small things left. Here he says an amazing thing. It's an amazing idea that the Rebbe says. Torah is very careful and conscious about Jewish money. God wants that the Jewish money shouldn't get lost. Say, what do I care? It's holy money. Even if it was small vessels that Yaakov left on the other side of the brook, like it says, we learned the law. There's a famous law that says that we know when it comes to leprosy and leprosy of the house, right? I'll just finish this piece. It says leprosy of the house. It says that until the Kohen pronounces leprosy, it's not leprosy. I mean, it could have all the signs of leprosy. It could have all the pointing that it's definitely leprosy, but the Kohen has to say it's leprosy. The law goes so far to say that even if the Kohen is not learned, and a learned man walks in and sees this is halachically leprosy, that learned person, the Talmud Chacham, cannot announce being pure or impure. He could explain it to the Kohen, who could be ignorant of the law, and tell the Kohen that this is leprosy, and therefore the Kohen should say it's leprosy, or vice versa. But until he says it's leprosy, it's not. And therefore, until the Kohen announces it, the house is pure. And therefore, if you have anything in the house that you want to get out, before you would call it impure, what they would do is they would say, okay, Kohen, you can't come in yet. You have to clear the house out, and then the Kohen can come in and say if it's leprosy. Because if there's any earthenware, because those are the only things that you can't make pure. You can't make earthenware pure, kli. So then you would have to throw it out. But even earthenware is cheap; it's not so expensive. But the Torah was careful about Jewish money, and therefore the Torah says, do not bring the Kohen in until you clear out even the smallest earthenware. Like it says, when it comes to the leprosy of the house, first they have to clear out the house. Before the Kohen comes, to see the leprosy or the plague. And until he pronounces it, it won't make everything in the house impure. So you clear it out first. So the Gemara says, what is the Torah careful about? If it's other kind of vessels, you could just dip them in the mikvah. And if it's talking about food that may come impure, it's okay. You don't have to eat all the food when you're pure. If you're not pure, you can eat impure food. You're not a Kohen. The Torah is only worried about earthenware. There's no way to make them pure in a mikvah, because that's the halacha. But also, the Rebbe says, it's not like you can never use them. You can use them when you're impure. But you can't use them if you want to in the times you are pure. And therefore, the Torah says they have a solution. Tell the Kohen to wait outside, empty out the house, and then bring him in. So what do we see? That Yaakov was careful even for small vessels. And therefore, Hashem wants us to get even the small vessels, even if it's something light, and we live in hard days. But Hashem wants every single spark to be taken out. Right? So finish here, he says, it's brought down, it's an amazing idea. When Yaakov left Lavan and was meeting Esav, he crossed his whole household. He takes everything over the brook. He's ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. And he forgets the small pans, the small pots, the pachim ktanim. Yaakov, it says, was ready for Mashiach. And he made a choice. He could have said, okay, listen, 99% is good. 99% is a good statistic. Who gets 99%, right? So he could have said, that's it, we're going to Mashiach. So we left a few pots on the other side of the brook. Yaakov said, no. Says every single spark has to come back. Even more so in our days, in the times of Mashiach. All the deadlines have been passed. Even the last ones, that we have just small things to do, and if we just get a little uncomfortable and make those things happen, then Mashiach is going to come. And Mashiach doesn't have to come, again, the Rebbe's point of this Sikha was, that Mashiach does not have to come in difficult ways, physically. We don't have to have any more levayas, and we don't have to have any more death, we don't have to have any more pain. Just a little bit of the small pots have to be picked up, a little bit of sparks, get a little bit uncomfortable for God. Go out there, say something nice to someone, stand on the street for 5 minutes, do a mitzvah, do a mitzvah, and we should be zeichen to come in Mashiach B'Korev. Laila Tov, Shabbat Shalom.